This is your next lesson on your GCSE Cold War studies. This lesson will focus on the Berlin Blockade. Last lesson, it was the Truman Doctrine, the containment of communism through both military advice and money, and then subsequently the Marshall Plan, which was a huge investment in Europe. The Marshall Plan would lead to the reconstruction of Western Europe because they are the only ones that accepted the money, and consequently, depending on which part of Germany and which part of Berlin we are talking about, the Marshall Plan is going to affect them. So to put this lesson into its context, we need to be reminded of an overview of what happened to Germany. Germany in World War II was run by Hitler. Hitler was hated by both the Americans and the British in the West and the Soviets in the East. And during the course of the Second World War, these two sides crushed Germany. Hitler took his own life, but this led the Americans and the British in the West and the Russians in the East. Before the end of the war, they had agreed to the partition of Germany into 4 zones of occupation: the American, British and French zones in the West, and the Russian zone in the East. The 3 Western zones will eventually become West Germany, and the zone in the East will become East Germany. But to complicate matters further, Berlin was to be divided in exactly the same manner. As the Cold War deepens, the Iron Curtain will run through Germany, but West Berlin will remain a little island of capitalism and democracy in the middle of the Russian zone of occupation in the East. The terms of the division of Germany allowed for the West to use roads, railway and air routes into West Berlin. But when Eastern Europe refused Marshall money in 1947, the West accepted it. The 3 zones of occupation in the West will recover and recover quickly, and so will West Berlin. And this little island of democracy here in the middle of East Germany will become a symbol built out of brick and concrete and glass and neon that capitalism works better than communism. This turns West Berlin into a symbol for the West, an embarrassment for Stalin and the East. Stalin needs to do something about Berlin, because not only is it an embarrassment to him, any East German with any common sense will cross from East Berlin into West Berlin and leave. West Berlin was rapidly turning into an escape route for everyone in Eastern Europe who didn't want to be there. So here we go, 2 pictures here to further illustrate the problem. This is the realistic map of Germany. Here we have West Germany and East Germany, and here is West Berlin. Zoom in and you can see the partition, the sectors more clearly illustrated there. The background then. By 1948, the effects of the Marshall Plan were being felt in both Western Europe and the parts of Berlin controlled by the British, the French and the Americans. Capitalism and democracy were clearly working faster than communism in Eastern Europe. This was both a concern and an embarrassment for Stalin. To deal with the problem of West Berlin, Stalin decided that he would blockade West Berlin. He wanted to force the British, the Americans and the French out, because ultimately West Berlin could not be defended if the Soviets wanted to take it. Of course, there was always the risk that by taking West Berlin, Stalin would start a war. What I would like you to do now is read the information in your booklet. It's all pre-printed for you and you work your way through. When that is done, we have 2 extension questions that you can jot some ideas down to. By all means, do that on the page around the writing here. What would the British and French and Americans look like if they left West Berlin? And then secondly, how do you supply an entire city if all the road, rail and water links to it are blockaded? The answer was to fly the supplies in to West Berlin. Stalin couldn't close the air routes. So instead of responding immediately to Stalin's blockade by either going to war or retreating, the West called Stalin's bluff. They said they would break the blockade. They would fly the planes in along the routes they were allowed to do so, and in doing so, it was Stalin's decision if he wished to shoot the planes down. Of course, if he did shoot the planes down, he would have a war on his hands. What I'd like you to do, using the second link here, not the first one, because you've probably seen the first one for homework, so ignore that one if you've done it. Using this second link here, what I would like you to do is make notes from the above clip about the Berlin Blockade. Link that to your own knowledge if you've already studied the homework video, which is the first one on Berlin. And what I would like you to do is complete the work in your booklet, the newspaper article on the Berlin Blockade. The sources have been pre-printed for you.